Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And we're just about 2 weeks away from baseball season. So I'm joined by Caleb Jarreau of the Daily Beacon, Tennessee student newspaper, a big baseball guy. So I thought there was no one better than Caleb to bring on and talk about this upcoming Tennessee Volunteers baseball season. Caleb, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Glad I could come on and preview some baseball. We're 2 weeks away, counting down every day before Tennessee kicks off at Globe Life Field. So I'm excited.
Yeah, let's jump into it. First thing I wanted to do was kind of go position by position and talk about who should be expected at that spot. We'll save pitcher for last, and then we'll kind of go in the numerical baseball scorekeeping order. So we're going to start with the catcher spot. Last year, we saw Cal Stark be that main catcher with Charlie Taylor behind him. This year, is it safe to say that we won't be seeing much of either of them? Those are maybe going to be midweek guys, and there's going to be a new face on campus behind the plate?
Yeah, I think this is the first year that Tony Vitello has kind of invested almost into that catcher position. You've got a lot of depth at the catcher spot. For me, Cannon Peebles is an easy shoe-in. If you wanted to bet some money on who would play catcher, I think that'd be the guy. He comes in, it's his sophomore season, so he won't be a one and done like you see some transfers. But his freshman year at NC State, he led the team in batting average with 352, slug 697, while leading the team ranked second on the team in home runs and then tied for first with RBIs. So that's a guy where he gives you a consistent guy behind the plate, maybe not the best defensive catcher, but if you've got somebody who's hitting 350 in the lineup, I think you can sacrifice some defense there. And then behind him, you probably shoe in Cal Stark and Charlie Taylor to maybe be midweek guys, or if you won Friday and Saturday, maybe not have to roll Cannon Peebles out there on a Sunday, give him a day off. But we saw what happened when Tommy White transferred from NC State to the SEC. So maybe Cannon Peebles will have that same success.
And you list all those stats. I think it's important to note he did all of that while being a true freshman, which makes it even more impressive. And then when adding it to the mix that he can swing on both sides of the plate and there's really not a big drop off on either side, that's going to probably stick him towards the middle or top of this lineup, you would think, just because of the versatility. So probably one of, if not the best catcher Tony Vitello's had on campus since he's been at Tennessee, if everything goes according to plan and he kind of lives up to expectations. First base, though, absolutely no question. Blake Burke, he's been that guy last season. A little inconsistency at the plate at times, but I think it's safe to say that he's a lock at first base, even though over the offseason he was taking some reps in right field and a little bit of other positions. But what are your thoughts on Blake Burke, and what are your expectations for a big junior year for him where if he plays well enough, he could get paid in the MLB draft?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but when we talked to him, I guess it was last Thursday or the Thursday before last, he looked like he had slimmed out some. He looked like and he talked about how some of his focus over the offseason was his agility. And really for me with Blake Burke, everything looks good. His defense was here or there, kind of had sporadic issues at times. You don't want your first baseman to have as many errors as he did. But when you're swinging the bat that well, like I kind of said with Cannon Peebles, you can sacrifice some defense. The big thing for me with Blake Burke is the swing and miss. If he can get his swing and miss down, then he can be a very consistent bat in this lineup. He's got 30 career home runs under his belt. He'll probably break Luke Lipsius's record this year. So he's somebody that waited his turn at first base, got to start all of last year, had success. And like you said, I think he's poised for a big junior year.
When you go over to the middle infield, that's where a lot of questions start to arise. Christian Moore was your guy at second base last season. There was rumors maybe you switch him over to shortstop and then you plug someone else in at second base. It seems like Christian Moore is that guy at second base. Is that safe to say that we'll see Simo in that same position next year?
I think he might start the year at shortstop just to test it out, see what happens. I know Tony Vitello, when you read the quote, it was like, Christian Moore has shown that he can play shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't necessarily a super confident, like, he's our shortstop, but he's shown that he can. So I would say Moore is the leading candidate at shortstop. He might play there at the beginning of the year, but I think by the end of the year, he ends back up at second base. And at the end of the day, he's a career over 300 hitter. So as long as he's in your lineup somewhere, I think you can take that. He's consistent at second base, made a couple good plays last year, flashed the leather a little bit. In the fall, he looked fine at shortstop. I wouldn't say he'd be the best shortstop in the SEC, but he was serviceable at the position. But I'm with you. I think second base is where you know what you can get from him. And as long as he's top half of the lineup hitting consistently still, you might not want to mess with the defensive position too much.
I know if we're going baseball numerical positions, I should be on third base now. But let's keep it in the middle infield just because it makes a little bit more sense with what we're talking about. Ariel Antigua, to me, is the guy that will be this team's starting shortstop by the end of the season. True freshman. He's impressed all throughout the offseason. What are your thoughts on Ariel Antigua? And am I out of line to say this true freshman could be one of the better players on this team and will be the starting shortstop by the end of the season?
I think his floor is low as a true freshman. We have no idea what to expect, but he's got a super high ceiling. So I'm with you. He could be one of the standout players on this team. Runs well. He's a smaller guy. I think Blake Burke was the one that called him small but powerful. In the fall, everything he hits is fast, hot off the bat. And I think he will probably end up being the starting shortstop by the end of the year. That's the position he played. He's a shorter guy, smaller guy, but he's quick. His arm is not bad. Whenever we watched him, I think when they scrimmaged Virginia Tech, he went in the 6-hole, backhanded a ball, and threw it the longest throw you make on the infield across the field. So for me, I think Ariel Antigua will probably be the starting shortstop at the end of the year. I watched him before he got to Tennessee when he was hitting with a torn ACL, and he was still peppering baseballs off the batter's eye. So the pop is there. It's just a matter of will he fall into what a lot of freshmen do and start swinging and missing a lot. But Tennessee's pitching staff is good. He didn't have that issue in the fall. So we'll see what happens in the spring. I think he's probably your starting shortstop. They might start Christian Moore there at the beginning of the year he's your veteran. You got to let him do what he wants. But if Christian Moore is starting shortstop at the beginning of the year, then I'm sure Ariel Antigua's playing second.
We saw in the Fall World Series driving balls to the warning track, to the wall in the hole against these top-level pitchers that Tennessee has, and then flashing the leather as well over at shortstop. So he really is the complete package, the five-tool player, whatever you want to call it. And a freshman, he's got 3 years of eligibility until he's able to enter his name into MLB draft. So he could be one of those household names in Knoxville if this career plays out how a lot of people think it could as well.
And he passed up pro baseball to come to Tennessee too. So
yeah, and that says a lot because you see all these guys that Tennessee lands, the younger Rucker brother, Mookie Betts way back in the day that Tennessee has on their kind of roster, and then all of a sudden the MLB draft happens and you miss out on that talent. Well, Ariel Antigua, he's going to be here for 3 years, barring a transfer situation. So there's a lot to look forward to right there. At third base, you assumed it would have been Zane Denton after last season, after he announces that he's returning. Well, things are trending towards him not being with the team. So some things maybe outside of just the baseball field, the baseball diamond that are leading to that circumstance. So if we're operating under the assumption that Zane Denton will not be with the team this year, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not saying that's a guarantee at this point, but if we're operating under the assumption he's not going to be with Tennessee baseball, is it Billy Amick at third base, the Clemson transfer, the guy that saw Tennessee baseball firsthand in the Clemson regional with the Zane Denton big home run to push Tennessee into a spot to make that super regional? Is he your third baseman? And how big of a pickup was that out of the transfer portal? Because he is an All-American caliber player.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think you can guarantee, obviously, that Zane Denton isn't with the team at the beginning of the season, but I think it's safe to assume at that point, just from the simple fact that if he wasn't practicing in the fall, baseball is very hard to just pick up in the 2 weeks that they give college teams to practice before the year. So I think it's safe to assume that Billy Amick will be your third baseman, and that's a bat that is a massive pickup out of the transfer portal. A 418 hitter, 12 home runs, 2 triples, 17 doubles, 58 RBIs. Just the stats, you can run down the list, and that's the guy you want in your lineup, hitting in the middle of the lineup. And my only thing with Amick is he showed some inconsistency defensively at third base. But like I said, I've said this with a couple of guys now, so hopefully they don't all make errors at the same time. But with a guy that can hit like that and with that pop in his bat, and proven in the ACC, which is not a bad baseball conference at all, that he can hit, that's a guy you want in the middle of the lineup. And he chose Tennessee over – he left Clemson to come to Tennessee because he wanted to play the infield. He wanted to play third base. At Clemson, I'm pretty sure he was a first baseman, DH only, and they had a 2-way pitcher that Amick would have to get pulled in the 7th inning every time that guy was done pitching so he could hit. So he wanted to play infield. He chose Tennessee. I assume he'll play third base. That'd be my guess. And hopefully For me, I feel like if you're bad defensively, that's a lot easier to fix than being a bad hitter because you're not facing good pitching every day, but you can go out there and take 500 ground balls every week and get better at it. So defense would be my only question with him, but I assume he can just slot in at any spot in the lineup and have a lot of success offensively.
It'll be interesting to see where he does end up in this lineup, though. A right-handed batter, you have a lot of right-handed guys at the top of the order. He's got the bat, like you said, to go anywhere in this order and see success. But where he ends up, to me, is something to look out for, just because you want to avoid that run of lefties, the run of righties. So where exactly he fits in, we'll have to wait and see. But he really could bat anywhere in this order and see a lot of success. Moving to the outfield, looking at left field first. To me, I have Dylan Dreiling penciled in, a sophomore who saw his share of at-bats and times in the field as a true freshman, not necessarily that everyday starter, but got his reps and looked solid in that role. Do you have Dreiling in left field? Do you have someone else? How do you see that position playing out?
I think left field is probably Dreiling's position. I think kind of a guy who can give him a run for his money, though, would be Reese Chapman, who's also a true sophomore at that position. He was a guy out of high school that was highly ranked. I'm pretty sure he passed up pro baseball to come to Tennessee. I could be wrong on that, but he hit 263 with 2 bombs in 15 games. Obviously limited looks, but whenever he was at the plate, he looked comfortable as a true freshman. And playing as a true freshman is hard, but I'd say pinch hitting as a true freshman is probably even more difficult. You've been sitting all game, and then you have to get up and go. But for me, I think it's probably Dylan Dreiling who takes over that full-time role. Maybe Reese Chapman would be your midweek guy or give Dylan Dreiling some breaks. But he played 50-ish games as a true freshman and from Kansas, hit just under 300 with 24 starts. He looks like a professional, really, when you don't see any high emotion, low emotion, any emotion at all out of him. He just kind of always even-killed, looks the part. I think he probably pencils in at left field. For him, I think he could probably play all 3 positions in the outfield. He's a super athletic guy, but I feel like when you look at the outfield as a whole, left field is probably the spot he'll end up. And that's where he played a lot in the fall and in the fall World Series, and then in a couple of those scrimmages. He looked comfortable in the outfield tracking baseballs, and arm, I wouldn't go plus, but his arm is good enough to where you probably don't want to run on him either.
In my projected outfield, the oldest guy on the roster the projected batting order in general, the oldest guy I have projected in the order is who I have in center field. Hunter Ensley, a redshirt junior. Everyone else a freshman, sophomore, redshirt sophomore, true junior. Hunter Ensley entering his 4th season, had a really good breakout season last year for Tennessee. Safe to say he's going to be that center fielder once again?
Yeah, I think that's probably your best bet on this team, maybe besides Blake Burke at first base, is that Hunter Ensley is your starting center fielder when the season starts. First, he'll have a first-time starter with him in left and right, more than likely. So I think, like you said, having a veteran guy who maybe on the field in terms of pure reps or games started isn't the most veteran, but a guy who's been in the program forever and a guy who's been around college baseball, having him with 2 younger guys who are inexperienced in the outfield will be pretty big. He hit just below 300. I thought his at-bats were always pretty solid. I didn't see a lot of swing and miss out of him particularly much. Sometimes the matchups would get him and teams would go into that, but with another offseason to work, and he's a wall defensively and a consistent guy in center, I think that's probably your starter and somebody where this team will have to kind of rely on, because he is probably slotted, I'd say, to take over leadoff maybe, because you lose Maui Ahuna. So you'll have to see what he does there. And that's not easy either, taking off the leadoff position. We saw with Maui Ahuna, his stats dropped from Kansas to Tennessee when he was leading off. So I think he'll have less swing and miss at the leadoff spot, which is really big for your leadoff hitter. So for me, like you said, veteran guy, I think he's probably the easiest guy to pencil in this lineup right now.
I have Hunter Ensley as the leadoff batter heading into the season as well. And I think that veteran aspect is also important to note in that role, just because you want a guy that's kind of sure-headed, been there, done that, knows what to expect, getting your game started and being there when that batting order flips. So Hunter Ensley could play a massive role for Tennessee this season. Looking at right field, though, feels like maybe the biggest question mark on the team at this point. A couple guys who could make their case, including a Reese Chapman, who you named in left field. You have Ethan Payne as a utility guy who can play everywhere. Colby Backus, a redshirt junior, another guy who's got a lot of experience, is going to try to make his case there. For me, I have Dalton Bargo there at the moment, a sophomore transfer from Missouri. He can play all over the field as well. What are your thoughts on the position? Do you agree that Bargo is going to get that role? And I mean, personally, I think we could see a lot of guys in that position as we go through out of conference play as well to see who kind of sticks.
Yeah, I think that's center field was the easiest pencil in, and this is probably the hardest. There's so many guys who can play right field on this baseball team. I like Dalton Bargo at the spot. He's a veteran guy who proved that he could hit in the SEC. Consistently hit 4, 5, 6 for Missouri as well. So that's a guy I like there. The only thing with Bargo is that he can play every other position on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So he can catch. He can play anywhere on the infield. He can play left field. He can play basically anywhere except pitcher or center fielder. So that's the only thing I kind of worry with Bargo is maybe he'll be the first off the bench guy. Maybe he won't be in the lineup every day just because he can go everywhere. For me, my biggest like high ceiling, low floor guy here would be Kavares Tears. If he can stay healthy, that's a guy that Tennessee would want in their lineup. And in his limited at bats, he had a hamstring issue last year. Then he went to summer ball and had a hamstring issue again. So like I said, if he can stay healthy, he hit 304 in 29 games with a lot of injuries, but everything off his bat is like 105, 106, 107. He swings it so well, and everything off his bat is so hot. And at a coaches conference not too long ago, Tony Vitello called him maybe the best arm in the SEC in the outfield. And we saw that a little bit because Tennessee does go too deep in their pregame warm-up. So we were able to see it a little bit, and he would just air it out. And it was fun to watch him throw it from right field. So he's my kind of X factor at that position. I think if you can have a guy who's hitting at 107 off the bat and you're playing on that turf baseball field, I don't think anybody wants anything to do with those ground balls. Another guy, like you mentioned, Colby Bacchus, for me, he's another one where we don't know what exactly we'll get. But at Walter State, he was one of their leading hitters. And for people who don't know Walter State, that's like the best junior college baseball team in America in Morristown. And they get guys from out of state, in-state, out of country, just the best baseball players for junior college. And he led them with 19 doubles to go, and he hit 19 home runs, 75 RBIs, won a junior college World Series with them, hit 384. So he's a guy that if that can translate to Division I college baseball, I know he had a good summer in the Appy League as well, then that's another guy you want. I think no matter what, right field is probably your pinch hit position just because it's so deep. So you want a lot of those guys to come off the bench and just kind of shoe in the outfield. So Dalton Bargo, I like SEC experience. He's probably your most consistent option. You might not get the best bat, but you know what you're getting. And then you have Kavares Tears and Colby Bacchus, two guys where you've seen them flash. Kavares Tears, you've seen flash at Tennessee. Colby Bacchus, you've seen flash in JUCO. Now it's just if they can stay consistent and stay healthy and kind of put that together, then they could be two guys who you could put in right field as well.
Yeah, I missed Kavares Tears there because I had him penciled in as DH in my order, but another spot where obviously you could put a lot of guys in, but it feels like you need a Kavares Tear bat in this lineup somewhere because what you mentioned, the power is just unbelievable to watch. So if you don't want him in the field, if you don't want him in right field, it feels like he's got to be your designated hitter, at least on most afternoons, because that is a bat that you really, really, really want in your order. It doesn't matter if it feels like he's flailing his hands out or if he's squaring one up. It's 100 plus exit velo whenever that bat touches the ball. But that'll be the kind of position by position predictions. Let's talk about the pitching rotation now. You got three starters. One of them cemented in stone. Everyone knows it. Drew Beam. Your second one, you can probably Sharpie it in with AJ Russell, the sophomore, but still an unproven guy as a starter coming out of the bullpen as a freshman, but with a really nice ERA in the true freshman season. And then the one that I don't even know if Tony Vitello knows right now, your final starter, your Sunday starter. There's a couple names floating out there that could be that guy. Can you take us through your Friday, Saturday, Sunday predictions for this pitching rotation?
Yeah, so I would say Drew Beam was your most consistent pitcher last year, which is why he didn't move from Sunday. No reason to mess with it. This year, he will move into that ace role, QB1, I guess you could call him. He was 9-4 last year with a 3.63 ERA and almost 90 innings of work. That's a guy, you know what you're going to get out of him. And now you're going to get it on Fridays, which for him, he seems like he's accepted that ace role pretty well. Everybody says he's stepped up as a leader, and he's had one of his best off seasons in Knoxville. So for him, I don't know how much you want to talk about Drew Beam. You know what you're going to expect. I wouldn't expect anything really different out of him. He was, like I said, your most consistent guy last year, and he's also an even killed guy. Like, you don't see a lot of emotion out of him either, which for me, from a starting pitcher, is probably what you want because you have to pitch 5, 6, 7 innings. You don't want to get so excited in the second that you burn out. So I think Drew Beam will be consistent ace guy. AJ Russell, like you said, is probably your Saturday guy. Only threw 30 innings last year, which is kind of worrying for me if you get halfway through the year. Tony
Mhm.
Vitello and Frank Anderson, the pitching coach, are very conservative with their pitchers as well. So he'll definitely have time to ramp up. 0.89 ERA in those 30 innings, though. And I thought fastball is electric, got a lot of movement on his off speed. He's another righty, so you have two righties in the starting rotation. So that makes me want to say that your Sunday guy, you might want to throw a lefty out there, or you just have save the lefties in the pen for matchups. Third starter, there's a list. You've got Xander Seacrest. Everybody knows Xander. I don't know if you want to make him a starter because his fastball isn't super, super fast. Wichita State transfer Nate Snead. That's a guy who has a super high ceiling kind of. At Wichita State did all right, but at Wichita State he was popping 98, 99, 100s. I don't know if you want to turn him into a starter. Jacksonville State, right-handed pitcher, AJ Causey. He's another transfer. What makes him unique is that his hand is almost dragging the ground when he's throwing the ball.
Mhm.
So that's never fun to hit. And then you've got freshman Derek Schaefer. Tony Vitello, and you were there, Ryan. Tony Vitello is really high on Derek Schaefer in the fall, and he looked good as well. I just don't know if you want a freshman in that Sunday spot. Who do you want in the bullpen? You've got Kirby Connell, Aaron Combs. You've got so many guys. For me, lefty Wyatt Evans, if he can stay healthy, is probably your Sunday starter. Now, we have no idea what injury he dealt with last year, which is kind of strange. But he made 19 appearances in his freshman year. Not a lot of innings. I don't know if he can handle the starter innings. They might go starter by committee in that Sunday spot and switch it up. But he's a guy with a super high ceiling. He looked really, really good against Virginia Tech, electric fastball from the left side, lots of movement. So I don't know who I would go with in the Sunday spot. Honestly, I like a lot of guys. I feel like they might just go with Xander Seacrest weekend one because you know him,
Mhm.
and then try to work some other guys in. I think Wyatt Evans is another guy they might go with if he's healthy. So for me, like you said, I don't know if Vitello knows yet. We definitely don't know yet. And they honestly might just go starter by committee or treat every Sunday like a midweek game and just roll a bunch of guys through. There's a lot of arms. You just don't know how many SEC pitchers you have just yet.
Right now, I have White Evans as the guy. I think that there is a lot to say about not throwing three straight righties over a weekend, and that could play a little bit into the factor of it. But I would be pretty surprised if we saw the same three starting pitchers every weekend throughout out of conference play. I think that Sunday spot will probably change nearly every single week until we get to SEC play, until they figure out exactly what they want there, what it looks like. But when you talk about those freshmen, Tony Vitello hasn't shied away from starting freshmen, right? Drew Beam was a guy that got his situations there due to injury. Chase Burns got his chances. Chase Dolander came in really young, not a freshman, transferring from Georgia Southern, but a young guy who came in and started right away upon arriving in Knoxville too. So Tony Vitello, he's not afraid to give the young guys the ball on the bump and see what happens. So that's also something to look for. On the same note of talking about freshmen, I'm not going to include Ariel Antigua because he would be the obvious answer here. But what's a freshman that you're really excited to see what they can do? Instant impact. I'll go through a list of some of the top ones. Derek Schaefer, Braden Sharp, Dylan Loy are probably the biggest pitchers in the freshman department. Coming off the bench for Tennessee, you have a Jeremy Comer, a Blake Grimmer, a Camden Bates, Holden Bronner, Dean Curley. They've all gotten their reps in the kind of fall preparation as well. Who's a freshman you're looking to see what they can do this year and kind of break out in their first season?
Yeah, there's so many, like you said. Cam Bates was a guy for me in the infield where I watched him in a fall practice pull a baseball down the left field line and end up with a triple, which is crazy. Especially, and for context, with the construction, the left field line was simply there was no like left field corner. It was just down the foul
It's
the
the
foul
foul
line.
line.
So he got a triple off of that, and that kind of caught my attention. Grimmer's another guy that's kind of caught my attention in the fall. But for me, you have to go with Derek Schaefer. The pitching staff, the pitching coaches, Tony Vitello, they're so high on Schaefer. And he's a guy where, like you said, lack of experience, you don't know what you're going to get. But obviously, if they're high on him in the fall, and he's been pitching against one of the best lineups in college baseball all fall with Cannon Peebles and Blake Burke and all the guys that we've listed, and he's found success. So he's a guy for me. He's out of Phoenix, Arizona. Since he stepped on campus, they've kind of been impressed with him. He's somebody that I would like to see pitch a lot and just see what he can give you. If we're talking about like who's going to be best freshman on the team, it would obviously have to be Ariel Antigua probably. But for the pitching staff, I'd go with Derek Schaefer, see what he can give you. And if you do end up with a freshman in that Sunday spot that gives you 3 to 4 innings every Sunday, but he's consistent, then that just sets you up for success next year once Drew Ream is out of the program.
Yeah, it's a pretty deep bullpen, so you can get away with putting a freshman and getting 3 to 4 good innings and then getting out before things blow up. Looking at the bullpen, we've mentioned a lot of these names. Schaefer could be a guy in there. AJ Cossey could be a guy. Kirby Cannell, a guy that's come in spot situations and done pretty well. The big sweeping off speed, the lefty that isn't going to blow anything by you, but he's proven to be really tough to square up. Xander Seacrest, if he's not that first inning Sunday starter type of situation, he's a guy out of the bullpen. Chris Stamos, a transfer, he could be a guy. JJ Garcia, we talked about Nate Snead. Andrew Benke had a freshman year last year that was pretty solid. He's going to see a bigger role as a sophomore. Brady Robertson, Marcus Phillips, another transfer who is just such an intriguing prospect, both-way player. What will he do? Looks like they're starting him on the mound, but just kind of a physical asset to have on your roster. There's a lot of guys you can go down the list that you feel good about pitching innings this year on the left side and the right side, which is not necessarily something Tennessee had either last year. So the bullpen gives you the opportunity to experiment with that Sunday spot and feel confident in a guy, even if he only gives you 3 innings at first, and maybe you have to build up to some of those longer innings towards the end of the season. So Tennessee in a good spot. It's a good issue to have when you have multiple guys that you feel like could step up and play that role at a high level. Before we get out of here, though, let's talk about season predictions. Where does this team finish in the SEC standings by the end of the regular season? And then do they make it back to Omaha? Is it similar to 2022 where they have a really good regular season but slip up in the super regionals? Will they be hosting a regional? Could they host a super regional? Just how do you see the season playing out?
I think the SEC is probably the hardest part of all of this to predict because the SEC is so deep. I think there's 8 or 9 teams ranked in the early top 25. I mean, it's going to be one of those leagues where everybody beats up on everybody. So your record might not be very good, but you're probably one of the best teams in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't pick them to win the SEC just because the pitching staff, you have a lot of talent, but it's unproven. But this lineup is guaranteed, I'd almost say, knock on wood, to have a lot of success this year. I think they host a regional. I don't think you end up with a situation like last year. We talk about team chemistry a lot. I know we talk about it a lot with basketball transfers where it takes 10, 15 games for them to get used to everything going on. You don't have that in baseball. There's not much team chemistry per se, besides maybe on the infield throwing to each other. So I don't worry about the transfers coming in and kind of slotting right in. I'd pick them to host a regional. I'd say they could probably be a top 16 seed. And if they're not a top 16 seed and hosting or a top 8 seed, and hosting a super regional, then they're probably 9 or 10 and just outside of it. I don't think I can pick them to win the SEC with how crazy SEC baseball is and how many teams in the league this year are very good. Even teams that didn't end up ranked, like in Auburn or some of those sleeper teams that will end up being really good this year. So I'm interested to hear your predictions. I think they could probably sneak a top 8 seed and host a super, but I think they'll definitely host a regional. And you won't end up – I wouldn't say you end up like a season like last year, especially with a lot of this team going through last year. I don't think you end up with those losing those early games and needing a loss against Tennessee Tech and running laps in the parking garage to kind of turn the season around. So I'd say host a regional, on the fringe for a super regional, and then once you get there, if your pitching staff is good and the offense stays hot, then a trip to Omaha should be a pretty easy sight.
Yeah, when you look at that SEC schedule that you mentioned, it's not an easy pull for Tennessee as well necessarily. Not that there's a lot of easy schedules that SEC teams are going to have in conference play, but you open things up traveling to Tuscaloosa, and Alabama is by no means a bad baseball program, so that's not a guaranteed series win. Ole Miss, off year last year, but that's a team that's looking to bounce back after recently winning the whole championship, and you get them at home, but Ole Miss is dangerous, and you never really know what to expect from them recently, but they could easily be a team that takes you down. Georgia at home, you should feel pretty good about that. But then you travel to Auburn, another program that has been on the up recently and done really well. And then going on the road just makes things even more difficult. Obviously, this one, LSU coming to Knoxville, the reigning champions, that's not an easy task as well. They lose a lot of guys, but it's not a rebuild, it's a reload for those type of programs. So Tennessee will have their hands full. They get them in Knoxville. That's going to help. but we'll see how that plays out just because of how good of a program that is. You go at Kentucky. That was an issue for that 2022 baseball team, the best team in Tennessee program history, one of the best teams in college baseball history. They couldn't get it done in Lexington. We'll see what that looks like this year. Missouri, a team that beat Tennessee last year as well. It was on the road. You get them at home this year. But another team that's given Tennessee issues. You go on the road to Florida, a team that was in the championship last year. Now you have to play them in Gainesville. Vanderbilt on the road. That's never easy. You keep going down. You finish the season at home against South Carolina, a team that historically is really successful. They've been hit or miss under their new regime, but still not a team that you go into the weekend going, we're at least going to win 2 easily if we sleepwalk. No, you have to show up if you want to win at least one game in that series. So there's not going to be any break in this schedule for Tennessee. I think they're going to win enough games that they're a top 16 team. They're hosting a regional. I think they're going to get through that regional pretty effortlessly inside of Lindsey Nelson Stadium. That home field advantage can go a long way. But I would be a little surprised right now if they were one of those top 8 teams. I think they project to me to be between the 9, 10 to 14 range right there, where you're comfortably maybe in that top 16, hoping there's a chance you can sneak into a top 8. Probably isn't going to happen. And then you're going on the road for a super regional, assuming that the tournament, the chalk wins out. And that's where I could see a little bit of trouble for this Tennessee team. It would be a good season. I don't think there should be a lot of complaints if there's not another College World Series appearance. But also, the ceiling of this team is really high. The ceiling of this team is a national championship. That's what it will be every year under Tony Vitello. So while my season prediction is a loss in the Super Regionals, I'm not going to be shocked at all if this team's going to Omaha for a second straight season for a third time in 4 years and has a shot to go home with the program's first national championship. So it should be a really exciting season. It'll be super interesting to see what they do in SEC play against all of these top opponents, but it's coming up soon. And Tennessee baseball fans are excited. It's kind of there's been a fan base there throughout its history, the dedicated guys that have been there through all the lows, but it's blowing up recently here in Knoxville. And I know just talking to people kind of on the streets, people are excited for this baseball season. We saw it at the basketball game yesterday. They brought the team out. They brought Tony Vitello and his Zakai Ziegler jersey out on the floor to throw T-shirts. And you could feel the reaction inside of the Food City Center as people were really, really pumped up to see those guys before they take the field. Caleb, thank you for joining me, though. Tell people where they can find you on Twitter and where they can find your work.
Yeah, so I appreciate you having me, Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at Jarreau16. It's on the little thing down there, so that makes it easy if you're watching on YouTube. And then you can find all of our stuff for the student newspaper at utdailybeacon.com. It's been a big week. As you know, Ryan, our paper came out today with the words plastered, "The NCAA is failing," on the cover of it. So another NCAA investigation always keeps things interesting here in Knoxville, and we'll be busy with that. So, but I appreciate you having me on, Ryan, to distract from investigations and talk some baseball.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Caleb. He has great baseball coverage throughout the year, so make sure you follow his Twitter, figure out what's going on with Tennessee baseball. And then if you're a student, make sure you pick up that student newspaper. There's boxes all across campus. And if you're not a student, but you're on campus for a game, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, grab one as well. They do a great job over at the Daily Beacon. Make sure you head over to VolReport.com, too, for all of our content over on the Rivals Network. We have the basketball coverage on both sides of things, men's basketball, women's basketball. Turbulent times for women's basketball. Lost to Ole Miss. I'll be in Athens on Thursday to see if they can get that bounce-back win. And on the other hand, the men's team, number 5 team in the country, just lost at home to South Carolina. What's up next? A trip to Rupp Arena to play Kentucky. We'll be there as well. So for boots on the ground coverage for that basketball team, for previews for baseball season, for football season that never stops in Knoxville, head over to volreport.com for all of our content. Links to everything you need is in the description. And thank you for watching.